yeah, I wanted to start this conversation with you going back to when we first met. I just remember this intensity, this this sort of force of nature that is you in the world. And it's still you in the world. And there was a lot of anger and there was a lot of sort of just intensity. Um, about what was happening, about about the injustice, about what needed to get done, the impatience. You were so profoundly driven about the work and what needed to happen and how are we going to move the money? How are we going to move the money? Um, and I think today I still see that all of that, but there's this softness, which we're reading even in the chat, right? There's this spaciousness in your approach. Um, And yeah, so I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about that story of like what was happening for you then and how did you come into shift, like allowing yourself to shift into more of this sort of somatic practice.
Mm. Thanks, Archana. I'm smiling. I was like, yep, that's how I was. I was definitely intense and angry, and yes, very driven. But that drive and intensity and anger were very destructive for me and for my relationships and at times for my work. When I was driven by anger and operating, I was operating from a place of trauma, not informed by it, but I was in the trauma of whatever my life has been. It made my actions messy. It made my attention scattered. My relationships were suffering because of my unskillful communication. Um, and I'm not saying that I'm not angry anymore. I am pissed. I am so pissed about the way the world is. What I'm saying is that I'm not consumed by it, as it doesn't drive me from the inside. I'm informed by it and I recognize it from a centered place. Then it allows me to act and not react, which is what I used to do. Um, and then not to destroy even more on my way, because I was righteous that we have a task at hand, we have an assignment, and the means we're justifying the ends of what we are working towards. Um, and just looking back, it was very unhelpful for myself or anyone around me.
When
Um,
you say unhelpful, or even destructive in some ways, like can you tell us a little bit more of what that how that showed up for you?
so I can give you a concrete example, and I think that this is around the time that you were referring to when you met me. It was in preparations to the AWID Forum 2016, I would say. Also 2012, I could refer to both of them actually. 2012 is when we presented the Where is the Money First research. I just remember now thinking back is like how running on empty I was, and so was my team. And it was a lot of really not attending to what we needed as human beings. It was just like, we have to produce this research, we have to produce the forum. And on the other side of it, we were exhausted, we were burnt out, and we were not in good relationships with one another. That's what particular I'm referring to, that I could feel like just, like the forest fire going through, like it accomplishes something, but it just leaves so
Yeah.
much destruction behind it. That's how I felt.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember some of that and actually being like, I don't know how to engage. You
Mm.
know, there was this like, I don't actually know how do I engage with you or how do I move into this because it felt just like this thing, this big, as you say, like a forest fire moving through the work, and there was no it's like, what's the entry point into that? And how do you even build a relationship or build a kind of a collective approach when you're moving with that level of intensity? Um, and I'm curious how if you could say a little more about how did you actually start making the shift and what does that journey look like? Because it doesn't happen over like to really sort of sit with all of those experiences and move into um, the work with your body and the somatics. It's been a journey. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. And I think this is something you're pointing out to, Archana, is like there isn't no overnight transformations ever. It's a really lengthy process. And for me, it started from, I lived with chronic pains for over 2 decades of my life. And I started addressing those pains through yoga in 2012. So that's if we look like at the benchmark, in 2012. And once my physical pain started getting more manageable, I started feeling like it was like a peeling an onion. When my physical pain was a bit more manageable, the fog of that controlling my life like dissipated a bit. And then I started seeing other parts of me that I didn't really like what I saw. And so then I started addressing it in other ways. So then I introduced meditation. I have been a daily meditator and I go to meditation retreats, silent meditation retreats for over a decade now. At least once a year for 7 days, I shut up and I just go deeply and listen to what's going on in there. And then layering on that, just I've always had a deep curiosity for learning. And so introducing different practices. And then I've had incredible community around me. And this particular methodology that I am sharing with you today, it's a Strozzi Institute methodology. And it was actually a dear friend in the movement, Malik Adat, who over a year and a half ago, in the conversations around our healing journey, said that this is the next step. Seems like that's the next, moment for you. And we went and did the course together for embodied transformation, and that was, as advertised, was transformational and definitely like reshaped how I've been thinking about my own physical practices. And the way it impacted me is, I've learned to say no better. And this is something I'm going to teach today as well, is how to say an embodied no. I also learned over the last 15 years how to grieve better. That's one thing that we don't do well is we don't grieve well. And there's so much to grieve in this world and in our society right now and in our personal choices. And some of the grief for me was I had to let go of the old version of me and grieve it. And I had to let go of some of the ways that I want to do things in the world that are not possible for different reasons, for my own personal physical limitations. And that's another thing is for those of us who live with some, concrete mental or physical abilities that our bodies do tell us no, we actually learn early on how to discern it. And so for me, it was also some of it was not even a choice. My body was choosing for me. There are certain things I cannot do. And then within those limitations, I had to grieve, right? What it is that I cannot do, but what it is that is allowed, what it is that my body can do, and where is the spaciousness that I can offer. I think I'm totally weird off from your question, but I'm sure you can bring me back.
not at all, not at all. I think
Totally on.
yeah, no, you're totally on. Exactly. And I
I
think this piece of sort of I think something in your story that is so I feel relatable for a lot of people is that moment of realizing like or reaching a point of serious pain in the body or serious sort of and that kind of being a catalytic moment and a catalytic push. And I think I'm always curious about like about that. What does that look like for everybody to kind of move into this? And do we need to get there? And the side of me that's like, why do we wait till that moment? And how can we start building more awareness without it getting to that place? But I'm curious. So like, I think you've layered many things over the years, and I'm wondering how are you feeling about all of that today? And what is it helping you in terms of your relationships, in terms of um, how you're navigating things differently. What does it look like?
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for that question. And I want to start the answering it by making something very clear. What I'm talking about here is not a never-ending self-improvement project, which is like a subject of capitalist tricks of you are never enough. I really want to underline that. That's not what I'm talking about. I have never felt like I'm not enough. What I have felt is I have a birthright to feel whole, and I was not feeling whole. And so my journey was to actually reach that wholeness. I'm not saying I'm fully there yet. There's always something, life is happening, right? But what I have now, where I'm at now, is much more peace that I can be with what is. I can be with what is. Some of you may follow the Buddhist philosophy that there is a avoidable and unavoidable suffering. So my, guide in life is there is an unavoidable suffering. My body has limitations. There is an unavoidable suffering. I will die. I will get sick. How I approach it and while I'm here is a choice. That's avoidable suffering. That is the second era that in Buddhism they say. So for me, all of these practices allow me now to be much more soft with what's coming my way. And there's so many challenges, like in my personal life right now and the world. And it's not like I am like Zen, kumbaya, and totally don't care. I do. I deeply, deeply care. I don't allow it to consume me and paralyze me, is where I'm operating in now.
And so what does that mean in terms of in it's the what does that make possible when you're not consumed and how does
Ooh,
that how
I have a skip in my, step. I have a bit more of joyfulness. The intensity that you mentioned in the beginning is like, it was just so not fun. I was not fun, and now I have a lot of fun. Like, and I can be with both. Like, I can be with the grief and anticipatory grief that I have for the world, and I can be really, really silly and joyful. And that is my wholeness. Like I was a joyful, silly child, and that's kind of the core of me. So this like not being consumed by certain emotions that have a tendency of passing, all emotions pass, right? So not getting too attached to them and having an ability of recognizing this is the container in which I'm operating, and I can be, within this precious container. So I don't work 12 to 14 hours anymore because I do know that's not productive for me. I am not producing good work when I'm working for 14 hours. And that's like that, you know, cycle in which we are operating. I got off that cycle. And I know there's also a lot of privilege that probably is in those choices, but a lot of it is also, I either continue doing that and completely drive myself to the ground, or I get off and do something else and differently. And it actually opened up so many other choices. Some of you on this call, so, clients that I work with, organizations that, my work. And it's a much better quality of work, actually. And I didn't lose the opportunities to offer myself in some ways, but I also haven't lost myself.
Yeah, I think and one of the things that's coming up for me as you share that is this, talking to different leaders in this moment and over these last months and just generally in the sort of culture and the way in which we move in doing social justice work or this kind of change work in the world, it feels like a compromise sometimes to slow down. It feels like we are really not doing enough. Like we are not um, if we aren't giving everything and depleting down to this, then we're just not doing enough, and the stakes are so damn high. They're just so damn high, and everything's on us. So it's like I love the beautiful lens you're bringing into this, and how do you work with that sense? Because I know from our conversations, like it's not like it goes away, right? That sense of shit, I should be doing more. It doesn't just go away. And how do you work with that? Because there is, yeah, it clearly does make a difference when you include and move with this wholeness, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and I wanted to just add here a story, maybe a little bit. Archana is like, have you ever been to a meeting with a leader or a facilitator who is anxious and stressed? And what does it do? Yeah. And what does it do to you? How do you as a participant feel in that space? It's a, open question to everyone. Just sit with. I would say for me, I get anxious and stressed. And in this somatic work, we talk about being the strongest soma in the room. Soma is my body. If I am calm, exactly, Olha, like you want that meeting to be over. So if I show up as a calm energy, as a centered person who can be present, I can orient the room to that presence. Just like the anxious and stressed person can orient the room to themselves. So this is what it allows. For me now as a facilitator, the way I show up, the quality of my presence actually can orient the room. I want to share a story. As I mentioned to you that I do annual meditation retreat in silence for a week. One of the main instructions our teachers give us when we leave the meditation center is please drive with the speed limit. Because majority of us want to go really slow. When we leave the meditation center, majority of people on that road receive speeding tickets for going too slow. Because we all just like, we slow down so much for 7 days that we just want to maintain that slowness. So the instruction is go with the speed limit. And the speed limit doesn't mean that you're rushing. And so the beauty of practicing it, to continuously practicing how do I feel when I'm being rushed? And for me to center, could I center while I am moving fast? My flight is going to leave. If I don't move fast on this path right now, but do I have to be hectic on the inside? Do I have to be in my head or can I be in here, checking with my body? Does my step have to be that I am like, don't know how my ankles are moving and then I can twist my ankle? Can I still move with the speed limit, but be in the body? So that's an invitation, and it comes with practice. More you practice, more you will be able to discern when I don't give a shit or when I am going too fast. What is the fluctuation that happens in my body and how I can find myself in the current moment where my child is nonstop talking to me and all I want to do is just like, please stop. I don't have capacity. So, but what do I do in that moment to like be with self and be with that other human who is really chatty for only 45 minutes a day? I don't need to like, I need silence. I need my meditation cushion to feel centered. I actually can be centered in the moment, in the speed that is happening right now. Because also thinking about like our evolution as humans, speed is also survival, right? And so like it's our gut feeling to really move kind of fast sometimes. And it's okay. Like I don't want to say that the only way to be centered is to be slow. So I just really want to debunk that myth. Um, I really appreciated the point about the collective Anarchy and the individual cultures that we all come from, like a big diversity. And this practice, especially because it's being done in Zoom, doesn't necessarily allow us as much of like attuning to each other's bodies. So what we are doing right now and here is practicing how do we tune to ourselves as individuals. And then in the collective, how do we tune to each other? The practice we will end this call with is called rowing. And the rowing practice as actually attunes our physical body and our breath and our heartbeats to each other. And I come from a communal culture and I now live in a very individualistic society. For me, there's a big disconnect. Like I feel disembodied when I am not attuned to other people. And that attunement, I'm not also romanticizing it. Like, right, there's a lot of messed up things are happening in collective societies, mine included. But there's a certain like attunement that humans need as social creatures to other bodies, to other people. So how do we create it and how we are actually um, modeling it? What am I modeling in the way I am moving through the world in order for other parties to attune to that? We keep on practicing it, right? How does that show up for us consistently? And then it actually becomes like, yes, I don't need to linger in it. And even if it's a maybe, Victoria, like maybe it's okay in this moment. And as a leader, because I have demonstrated so many times to all of you that I can say yes, I can say no. So you can be comfortable with my maybe for just a moment. Give me a breath, give me a little bit of space. The one expectation also in the current society is that the leaders are supposed to have answers to everything, debunking that through the somatic practices. And sometimes I don't know. And sometimes I'm really deeply uncomfortable with what's coming up. And can I just take a moment? And can we take time as a team? Can we regroup tomorrow? And then being able to navigate that with a clarity for yourself, I find it very helpful. Last, the point about the setting boundaries that people don't like, then it's done with them. Love it so much. If we continue with these practices or you carry on with the practices of the somatic learning, and I'm sure those of you who already know there is one practice, it's called centered decline, um, and also a centered grub. So centered grub is like when somebody comes to you and requests something and actually physically touches you. And then you stand with it and you're like, oh, how does it feel? And then you work without the content and you work with content with that grab. And then that also allows you to understand in your body, how do I feel when somebody asks me something? Am I able to set the boundary? But also when it's a decline, like when you come to somebody with a request, we physically walk to somebody and saying, I have a request. And then somebody takes us and physically turns us around. And then we just like stand with it, like, whoa, whoa. Like first time I did that practice, I almost bursted into tears. Like somebody physically turned me around, moved me out of their physical space and said, no, I decline. And then practicing that and practicing got me to the point of I am actually able to appreciate somebody setting boundaries with me and not make it personal. One of the reasons it's difficult for somebody to accept boundaries is we make it personal. And then if we make it about, no, this person in this moment right now is saying no to my request, not to me as a human being, it has nothing to do with my worthness. It's just about this particular moment, this particular request, this particular situation that has nothing to do with who I am as a human being. And that allows this, like, oh, I see you, I hear you. And then there's also the space in between us, right? There's my boundary, there is your response, and then what we can do collectively in that space between us. So this is layering the practice. In 2 hours, I'm giving you like a mini crash course. But I like strongly advise if this is something that you're curious about and want to explore more, there's so many spaces to do that, and I'll share after the course as well.
And I wanted to switch gears a little bit, Angelica, for this last part of our conversation. We are going to do a few more practices, but I did want to talk about your work because it's super duper important in this context and thinking about resource mobilization, which is your area of expertise, and thinking and just where you've poured your heart and energy into. And I'm curious how the somatics has kind of supported the evolution of your work. And I'm asking this in a kind of pointed way because you're doing something that I know from our previous conversations that I think would have been totally unheard of when I met you, or just impossible to even consider when I met you years ago. And that's you're actually studying what it means to be a wealth advisor and thinking about how do we have these conversations with people in spaces where there are concentrated pools of wealth and to really be in dialogue, be in connection, be in um, a modality of strategist and activist in these spaces now, right? And so I'm curious if you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Connecting the dots with the earlier conversation, Archana, is we live in a really messed up economic and political and social infrastructure and system where a few are benefiting from majority of us through extractive means. That's always been the truth. My attitude to it was before this deep conceived anger and despise to those few who are holding that wealth. And now it shifted to curiosity um, and subversive strategy in a way. Because I believe that fundamentally everybody wants to be whole. And I don't think those people are whole either. Um, Especially right now, as you said, I've spent over 20 years researching funding trends and moving the resources to our movements. What I am recognizing is like we are now in the biggest transfer of wealth, generational wealth transfer. And so there are people of my generation and younger are inheriting a lot of wealth from the older generations. And they think and feel differently about the money. And if we don't show up, somebody else will to support the transfer of wealth and where that wealth goes. So my choice comes from a place of I am deeply, for the lifetime, committed to unlock and liberate money deeply. How I do it is changing now because before, if it was spend 2 years on doing a research that may or may not pick up by somebody, and we were lucky, it has been picked up, and the Dutch government committed a ton of money and Canadians based on the research that we have done. So I'm really proud of that work for sure. Now, in the current moment, with 2025, institutional philanthropy is going through, excuse my language, shit show. Where it's going to end up, we probably all know. And majority of our precious feminist organizations most likely are not going to be supported long term. So I'm thinking a couple of steps into this. And it started it about 3 years ago of with I'm not the only one. There's many of us who are, looking at the different resources that are out there and how we can unlock them and engage with them. I live in Berkeley, California, which is in the belly of the Silicon Valley beast, which is the biggest generation of wealth historically, more than Roman Empire. So I feel responsibility to really be curious with what these people feel and think like and how I can get into their hearts and hopefully their wallets to unlock the resources. And I have capacity now to really not get off the hook when they say something outrageous that I disagree with. So that whole centering, when they're just, they say all sorts of things. So this is why I'm studying now to like officially do it more, in addition to like having more of a somatic and 25 years of experience in the funding community, but also having like a technical skill, the technical skill of advising and working with the wealth holders. But that's my like next contribution to the same, underlying lifelong project of unlocking money.
Yeah, the purpose is exactly the same and the manifestation is completely different and is beautiful. And I'm also hearing in that this willingness to sit with what's different and so profoundly different and what you actually really disagree with um in terms of values and how things are being done, but not from a place of I don't care and you're wrong, um, but from a place of okay, what's actually going on for you? How do I understand this differently? How do I see it? How do I move into it differently? Um, yeah, I think it's for me, I think when we were talking about talking about having this session even a few months ago, it was just astonishing, right? And it's you think of, you know, from where when we first met to where we are now, to where you are now, sort of just even that time frame, let's say call it 10, 15 years. Um, it's it's that intentionality you brought, I think it's really like open. It looks like it's open so many different things in the way that you're showing up, in the way that you're working. And I'm curious if there's anything else that you think people should know about trying on these sort of or stretching into some of this other ways of doing.
Mhm. Um, Change is hard. Change is really, really hard. And um, I think we as humans forgot that change is normal, because we'll swim in the waters of social construct that celebrates particular way of being, whether it's youthful body or particular achievement and success notion in life or trajectory of how your life should be transpired. And anything outside of it feels like deviation. And it's difficult for an individual to actually be okay with their own version of life when you're from every direction bombarded with certain messaging. So I just want to normalize that it's okay to feel it's difficult. And I'm starting from a personal because it's always personal, right? We're starting from our bodies. If I am getting the messages that my body is supposed to look and act certain way all the time, but my body looks and acts very, very different way all the time, there is a dissonance, right? And so I have a opportunity and responsibility to myself to really be authentic to what's showing up for me in me and accept certain things and accept also the change as it is. That then dictates for me, this is my journey and translates into my professional space too. I cannot pretend that the way we have been operating the NGO industrial complex, the funding modalities, and everything, that will stay the same as it has been. It has played its purpose, it has played its role, but it's dying out. It's shifting. It's really transforming. I can sit here and be holding on tightly to it as we sink, or be in the space of what does this allow? Is there a third way? So there's another practice that we do when the two people come from two sides of you and they give you completely opposite opinions about one issue and they pull you into different directions. They pull you into different directions. And then what you practice in this is, do you allow one direction or another to pull you, or do you stay in the conflict conflict of these two directions and allow a third space? Back to the ball. Is there a third way that is possible? So this is where I'm at right now. And my invitation to everyone, we can be holding on to one position or another position, or we can be in the spaces like, whoa, maybe there's something else is emerging. Is there something else that emerging? Maybe not. Maybe we're, need to go one way or the other. But if we're just stuck in that mentality, is like right and wrong, one way or another way, we're actually not allowing the third way to show itself to us. So my invitation is like whatever, wherever you are in your professional space, personal space, practice with allowing something else, not being in the dichotomy of like just the two.
Yeah, that gets to the other question I had is how do we bring this more into the movement work, into philanthropy, into the spaces that we are working beyond our daily sort of individual practices of this work. And if you have any reflections on that.
I think that's one of the ways is um, being less righteous about the answers that we think we have. Because right now, I think we are in a place of questions more than answers. Many of us are trying to make sense of unraveling that is happening and allowing the unraveling to happen without being 100% certain we have answers. And still not losing the core, right? Like the values are not changing. The direction of justice towards the arc of justice is not changing. But the how we're going through it, who we're inviting in the space, who is allowed in, how we're doing it and talking to each other, maybe can have a shift. That's I think one way. The other way is again bringing back to the way I show up is my responsibility. And if every one of us shows up with the most authentic responsibility towards how we show up and how we impact others, I shared earlier that I was operating from the place of trauma. Now I'm operating from the place of being informed by my trauma. It's not driving me anymore. I'm informed by it. I'm informed by my past, but I'm not allowing it to spill over to other people. We have so much hurt in our movements. We are a lot of hurt people, and the hurt people hurt people. We've heard this many times. So hopefully, more of us that do some healing work for ourselves and then bring it with us to the work that we're doing. I'm thinking oftentimes about the organizations and leadership and institutions in the current moment that are actually thriving and that are doing well. And I can absolutely pinpoint it two criteria. One, the leadership is actually has done their own work on healing. Two, they know how to be agile and reinvent, not to be stuck in the change is not possible. And I haven't done a thorough research the way I like doing it. This is just my, but I'm now geeking out on it. And I may just actually like put together a list of 15 organizations that I think are doing fantastic work. And this is my hunch that there's two criteria that I see in them. Leadership has done their own personal healing work and then are doing it with their teams. And they know how to reinvent. They know how to be with the uncomfortable questions around change.